Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel in the first place. Today we have a Bakugou ex-listener. I want to apologize because this one is going to have female pronouns, but yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. It's the lingering thoughts of her that keeps Bakugou up at night. The first time she had come to him, he had confused her for an angel. Never mind the sheer amount of blood he was losing, and the fact he was fading in and out of consciousness. She was absolutely glowing under the moonlight. The sharp whistling of her sword would call him back to reality. The savior before him extended a hand to him before he was able to gather the bloody scene beyond her. When she vanished as quickly as she came, he wondered if she had only been an illusion. It wasn't until he saw her again that it became clear she wasn't all in his head. This time it would be his chance to return the favor. When it would be him to hold his hand out to her, she graciously took it, and since then they stuck by one another. Since arriving at the compound, she was naturally an instant spectacle. Quickly, the initial shock of a woman's presence in the headquarters subsided, and in its place became respect for her swordsmanship. The hilt of her sword sat naturally on her hip. She was effortless with it, a true talent. It would show in the way she'd move as if the wind was guiding her every strike. The look of awe on the faces of her opponents. Bakugou would have a hard time pulling his attention from her form, despite the fact he had other business to attend to. The image of a small smile on her face, even after Bakugou would defeat her in a spar, was stained in his mind. And again, the cocky grin when she would be the one to come out victorious against him. She was one of the few in the compound to ever have the honor of bragging such a thing. She'd easily have him pinned on the ground, whether it be by his own distraction or her pure strength. The curve of her thighs hovered over his own. How easily his hands would find themselves on the small of her back, guiding her to close the distance between them. Her soft whispers in his ears. He'd eventually lull into a restless sleep at the sound. She was it for him. When Bakugou would find himself questioning what he fought for, why he wielded his sword, she was his answer. If he was given an ultimatum, he would choose her over being a samurai. However, before he knew it, it was too late, and he was never given the choice. They were meant to meet on the docks years ago. He waited and waited until Ida eventually got fed up with his moping and dragged him away on the ship. He didn't want to leave for Ida, not without you. His comrades would try and console him while out on the sea. They wrote you off like you were fucking dead. Maybe he should have seen it from their perspective, but he could only lash out at them. He thought he was supposed to be okay with death, and while that may have held true for himself, it did not mean he was okay with the possibility of yours. Even now, years after the Force's disbandment, he still believes you're out there, waiting for the day when you two reunite. One day, he's strolling down the street market. He'd gotten particularly skilled at avoiding any attention to himself, so not to be recognized as a former captain of the Shogunate forces and be subsequently executed. A few feet beyond him, there was this boy, perhaps no older than 8, he deduced, loitering around a basket of apricots, looking awfully suspicious. Normally, he would find no interest in others around him, but when he sees the kid expertly swipe a handful of the small fruit, he couldn't help but follow after the boy. It reminded him of a certain kleptomaniac who would often steal Ida's poetry books he'd pen under an alias. She'd eventually get caught later on, but it didn't stop her from coyly using flattery to get out of any punishment she would have received. She really did love Ida's writing, and Bakugou came to love the sound of her voice reading it to him. Luckily, there weren't too many people walking the streets, otherwise Bakugou may have very well lost the kid. When the two of them turn a corner into a secluded alleyway, the ex-samurai calls out to the thief, who jumps at the sound. No surprise, the kid breaks out into a sprint. But Bakugou has no issue catching up. The poor boy struggles against Bakugou's light hold on his arm, dropping a few of the stolen fruits on the dirt floor. The blonde picks up the fallen fruit with his free hand and shoves them into his empty pockets. "Where are your parents, kid?" Bakugou questions. The kid grunts out a few words in defiance without giving an answer, to which Bakugou chooses to ignore. He's leading the kid back to the fruit stand, where he takes it upon himself to pay for the problem child's apricots. The older lady behind the stand was very thankful, and after recognizing Bakugou as one of her regular customers, offered him a discount on his next purchase. The boy is still visibly pissed at Bakugou, but still followed him despite the angry blonde telling him to fuck off. He didn't even bother to use any friendlier terms. He's trailed all the way home and starts to wonder if this kid goes out of his way to put himself in troublesome situations. "Go home, kid." "I don't have one." He deadpans. There's no emotion in the kid's voice, almost mirroring Bakugou's own lack of. When he asks for the boy's name, he replies with no surname. Just a simple Akio. He swears he's going to throw up. That was supposed to be the name for their boy. Maybe it's the fact that Bakugou can see his own eyes in the kid's crimson ones, but the shape is a little more like hers. It could have been the robes Akio was wearing, the same pattern she had on the first time he met her. More hopefully, the fact that their kid could have been the same age if they had a family. He decided to let the kid stick around. Akio was an absolute brat, as the ex-samurai would come to learn quickly, always snooping around where he shouldn't be, getting himself in trouble whenever he can, and nearly eating more than Bakugou thought he could provide. The kid was persistent. Bakugou would give him that much. On the rare occasion where the blonde would pick up his rusted sword, Akio would ask to spar. He would normally turn the kid down. However, he figured he would give in just this once. So, when the stance the boy takes up reminds him a little too much of a certain someone, Bakugou is completely taken off guard. When the kid wastes no time in striking first with the wooden sword, the hit lands in the same damn spot that she would always attempt to strike first. Bakugou couldn't continue on with the duel, and despite Akio's whining and cursing, the blonde made his way to his room in the far corner of the house, hiding himself off from the world and crying until no more tears would come out. "Who are your parents?" Bakugou was the first to open up the conversation between the two the next morning. He was sure he knew he'd been crying based on his red, puffy eyes and the fact that the kid hadn't made some shitty comment about his appearance. The boy was surprisingly empathetic when he needed to be. "Mom said I shouldn't talk about it." Bakugou scoffed. "What about your dad then?" Akio just shook his head and focused his attention on the breakfast in front of him. He got the message. "Who taught you how to sword fight?" Bakugou didn't know where this sudden interrogation was coming from, but he didn't bother hiding his curiosity. When Akio didn't bother answering his question, Bakugou was getting frustrated. He pushed the matter further. "I fought a lot of people in my life, and only one person carried themselves like you did yesterday." This seemed to pique the boy's interest a little. "My mom taught me," he nimbly responded. Bakugou was full on studying the kid in front of him. He was skeptical, doubting the thoughts swirling inside his head. He almost never doubted himself. "Your mother," Bakugou carefully started, hoping not to give away his nervousness. With shaking hands, he reached into the hidden pocket of his attire and pulled out the tattered image. He slid the photo across the table after stealing a glance at it. When the boy in front of him burst into tears and threw himself into Bakugou's arms, only a single thought popped into his mind. Even if it wasn't the one he always hoped, a piece of the two of you would always be together, and for that, he was thankful. Alright, so that's the end of this one. I hope you enjoyed. Music link, fanfic link, Discord link, and thumbnail art link are all going to be in the description. Sorry if this wasn't really ex-listener, but you know, it is what it is. I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, whatever, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye!